home, but I do miss going out to see them. But
Wilma has better popcorn than Michael has. That's all I have to say.
Are we ready? I'm assuming we are. No one said no, so let's call the meeting to order. It's February 26th, it's noon, and this is the regular monthly meeting of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. I think we can note that all of the board members are present, and dispense with introductions. Anyone who is either listening or on MCAT, who might be listening because they thought that we were going to be dealing with a project at the county elections office. Evidently that was at least in the papers that we were going to be doing that. That is not on our agenda today. That application is not ready for us to act on. And so if you've tuned in to see that, you can stay tuned in and watch other business or do something else. With that, let's move on to the January 21, 2021 minutes. Everyone's seen them. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Ruth, second?
Second.
Nancy, any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion passes unanimously. Any public comments or announcements on matters that aren't on our action item agenda from anyone?
I'll say it was a nice article in the Missoulian a few days ago about the DJ&A project.
Amen.
It was a very nice article and very well done.
Very.
Word is that's been circulated in Helena.
Ah, good.
Okay.
Would require people.
Any other public comments or announcements? Going once, going twice? If not, then let's move to the action item. And the first item on the agenda is the FY20 audit.
Jill, you're muted.
Joe, you're muted.
I am going to elevate Will Parnell from AZ to a panelist, so he can join us for that presentation. And Jan Schweitzer also.
We got him?
I think they're coming in.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, Will.
Okay, good. I'm attempting.
We can't really hear you.
Let me call in. I think the audio is better.
Yeah, we can barely hear you. At least I can barely hear him.
It's very broken up.
Okay. Good to know that that's what everybody else thought.
Jan, do you want to try your audio?
Okay, I have called in. Is the audio better?
It is a little better.
Okay, good. I do not know why my video won't start, so I apologize for that. I will proceed. I don't know if, oh, I do see your name. Okay, so great. So good afternoon. My name is William Parnell. I am a supervisor with Anderson Zermillman, and I had the opportunity to in charge the financial statement audit of Missoula Redevelopment Agency in FY20. Here with me today is Jan Schweitzer, the signing partner for this engagement. Jan, can you hear me okay?
We can't hear Jan. We show her as being on. Yep, and now
muted. That's okay. We'll go ahead and proceed. Before we dive in, I just want to give a huge thanks to the staff at MRA. As usual, they were very professional, helpful, and resourceful during this 100% remote engagement, which was the first for us, AZ and MRA, to perform this engagement 100% remote. And I think it was extremely successful. Again, thanks to the folks at MRA. So let's move to the opinion. The FY20 audit was conducted to review the agency's financial statements to ensure that they are accurate and in compliance with accounting regulations. In our opinion, the financial statements in all material respects are in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the U.S. On to the statements themselves. There was no significant presentation changes or new accounting pronouncements adopted in fiscal year 20. We're happy to say we encountered no significant difficulties or disagreements in dealing with management in performing and completing our audit. Professional standards require us to accumulate all known and likely misstatements identified during the audit, other than those that are clearly trivial, and communicate them to the appropriate level of management. We're happy to say no such misstatements were noted during the FY20 audit. I won't get into the detail of the financial statements unless there is any specific questions. The financial statement highlights are provided in detail starting at page 5. And so with that, I will open it up for any questions.
questions. We've gotten so used to squeaky clean audits that we don't.
No question.
Are there any questions from anyone? Yes, Nan.
Do we need to, how long do we need to keep reporting ERD 1?
I can answer that. Will and I talked about that, and we are going to close ERD 1 out this year. We just want to make sure that we have that procedure, that protocol in place. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about that and close it out this fiscal year so we don't have to report it anymore. It was something that I would have done last year, but I think I just forgot about it with COVID.
Is that a board decision?
It can be. Sure, we are just carrying, what we did is we, essentially the tax increment financing mechanism under state law has expired, but the district itself has not expired. And we let the district continue to exist so we could collect those delinquent taxes. And then a few years back, Will, you can chime in if you recall how long ago, but my recollection is that the county wrote off a lot of their debt that was, had been out there for several years, and adopted kind of a procedure protocol that they were going to do that if it was past 5 years possibly. And so that's what happened. And so we haven't really seen any more collections on that district. It's been about the same for the last 3 years.
So my question was maybe that's something that we need to ask city attorney or something. Is that something that the board needs to do officially in order for you to stop auditing?
I think that's a great idea. I've never done one of these, and nor has MRA, I don't think. So I think that's a good idea. I think that would really add closure to what we're doing, and that would help with what I need to do and what the AZ would do on their end. So.
Okay. Any other questions? So what? Somebody remember to put that on a future agenda, and we'll get her done. Any additional questions? If not, do we approve what, I forget this every year. We have to take some action, right?
We've always done a motion of acceptance
Okay,
to accept the audit report.
okay. Nancy?
I move to accept the audit report, and not part of the motion, though I'd like to comment. And that is, I like very much the way that this report documents the use of tax increment monies and the programs that are established by state law. The managed discussion and analysis is especially thorough, and each year I think it's more comprehensive and therefore more enlightening. So I want to thank our staff, Jill especially, and also the auditors for the detail and the descriptions that results in the excellent audit report. A special note to me was notes to the financial statements, especially note 5 that covers long-firm debt. I think that's an excellent part of the report. So that's just a comment on my motion to accept the audit.
Okay, let's get a second to the motion. Somebody?
Second the motion.
Okay,
And I guess I'd like to make a comment too, that members of the public may be reluctant to open up an attachment from an accounting firm that's 100 plus pages. But to the extent any member of the public is interested in the types of good works that MRA accomplished in the last year, this report is a great way to learn about the types of projects that MRI participated in last year. And in particular, on page 7, there is a graph that demonstrates that approximately 75% of MRA's expenditures in FY20 were public projects. And then as you go through the report by division, there is a disclosure of the types of public projects that each district participated in. This is a great tool for members of the public to learn about really what is happening at MRA, and to and a review of it, even cursory review of it, would go a long ways in educating folks on some of the misconceptions that are out there about MRA. So I would hope that folks who are interested would get over their reluctance to open up a accounting report of 100 pages in length and realize that within it there is great information in case someone is interested in what things are happening at MRA.
okay. Any additional comments? I guess I would only add to that not only I think is that true, but also when you start reading it, the report's very well written, which I give, to Will and to his staff, but also to the fact that since there are no findings, they have extra time to polish the pearl in their writing. And anyway, it's good reading. Any public comments on the motion? As I understand it, if you want to make a comment, Jill will let you in to do that.
I'm looking at the participants in our meeting, the attendees, and I am not seeing any hands raised. If there are any attendees that would like to make a comment, now would be the time to raise your hand.
Okay, seeing none. Unless there's anything else, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
None. Will, Jill, all, thank you all very, very much. Jan?
Thank you, folks. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but you certainly don't have to. All right, moving next to 3100 Brooks Street. 3100 Brooks Street. Let me pull up my copy of the Annette, this one's yours.
Annette, I should, you need Jeff and
Erin Donahue.
let me go out and see if I have to elevate them. So give me a second here.
While we're waiting, the new format for getting the agenda works fine. I think we were asked to comment on that. Aaron, we can see you. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you for having me today.
Okay, and who else were you waiting for, Annette?
Jeff, excuse me, Jeff Mathis, project architect.
Jeff's got both his, it looks like he's muted and his video off. But
Here I am.
Great.
there he is. All right, Annette, you're
Great.
on.
All righty.
Sorry about that.
Hi. We have received a request for facade improvement assistance for work at the building at 3100 Brooks Street, which is Align Properties owned by Dr. Erin Donahue. The request, so the current building located 3100 Brook Street, just slightly south of the mall. The current building, if you're traveling south on Brooks Street, it was built probably in the 70s-ish, sort of suburban strip mall appearance. Rada Paint, Papa John's Pizza, and recently had been Craig's Mart on the western facade, or the western unit. It's a 3-unit building that has 3 businesses. This is, if you're driving north on Brook Street, this is the building right here. Looking at it directly, so looking east from Brook Street, Craig's Mart had been located in this western unit and the other 2 units. So Craig's Mart has vacated the property, and Dr. McDonough is proposing to convert what had been Craig's Mart into his orthodontic practice and move his practice into this facility. I believe right now, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, 10 employees, and expects with a larger space to be able to expand his practice by about 6 more employees within the next 3 years. So Rada Paint, these are existing conditions of the facade as it is today. Rada Paint will stay as a tenant. Papa John's will stay as a tenant. And then so their interior renovation and exterior renovation. It'll be a phased project. The exterior renovation will occur first, and then the interior renovation will be a phase 2. So this application is for the exterior improvements, the facade improvements. The proposal is to relocate the entrance for the west unit to the west facade, so it actually faces Brooks Street. Take down this dated sort of parapet, repaint, replace some windows, windows and doors, and add some articulation to articulate the doorways to each of the units and give some street presence to the property. This is a rendering that the architects provided, which shows the but-for. This is the top image is a rendering of what the project would be without MRA assistance. So relocating the entrance to what will become the orthodontic office so that it fronts Brook Street, some articulation over the entrances to Papa John's and to Rada Paint, repaint the facade of the building, and some modest awnings on the building. With MRA assistance, the awnings would become more articulated, a little bit more robust. There would be some paneling. I believe that this is hardy board paneling and metal paneling to articulate the doors, and the awnings would have a wood insert in them with lighting to articulate the windows and doors. The facade assistance also would be used to replace some of the windows and thus improving the energy efficiency in the building. The overall exterior, the facade work, the exterior work is a little over $400,000, the budget for that. A 50% or a $50,000 facade improvement grant would equate to about, 25% of that, a quarter of that. And the MRA, the program allows for 25% of the total cost, or $50,000, whichever is less. So the request certainly falls within that, within the program. Let me see, I don't know that there's much else that I need to add that hasn't been covered in the memo. At this point, I will let Dr. McDonough or Jeff speak, and if they have anything that they want to add, or if you have any questions.
Okay, either one of you guys want to add anything to what Annette's told us? Dr. McDonough?
Sure, I'd love to. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine, thank you.
Great. Over the last 3 years, our business has gone from 5 to 10 employees, and I expect we're going to continue to grow. For me, this is an opportunity to both purchase a piece of real estate and improve the area. And so when we're thinking about this, for me, it's really exciting. We're gonna build something that's going to be worth having on Brook Street, and I think it's going to be beautiful because I'll be in the building and part of it, and we're going to make sure that the grounds stay excellent. We'll make sure that the building stays in very good repair. And I think that it's going to create a little bit of a professional space. Cornerstone Dental just opened a 5,000 square foot dental facility just south of this building. And so now you're going to have a few professional buildings in the area that are a little bit larger size. I think that it will create somewhat of a draw to the area for future professionals. And I'm really grateful to be here. It was great to hear the beginning of this meeting. You guys do a lot that most public just don't know about. And so thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, Jeff, you got anything to add?
I think I'll piggyback a little bit. I thought Annette did a great job in describing what we're doing. A couple things with the building. Right now, you take that big awning marquee off, which is dated and old. The building's fairly plain and simple, and there's no articulation to it. So what we endeavored to do was add textures, elements, some dimension to it to make it responsive to pedestrians and much more human scale. And as you can see too, we've added a lot of landscaping. You know, part of that whole Brooks corridor, there's not a lot of landscaping. There's a lot of hardscape. So we made an effort to add landscaping, add some color, texture, and light to just soften it. And I will add too that, as we all know with Brooks, the exposure of this building is incredible with traffic. It's a major arterial. It engages a lot of Missoula daily by drive-bys. So we're excited to be a part of enhancing this building. And I think having Dr. McDonough's group in here will really be an asset to the area and the community. And we appreciate your guys' interest in this project and your assistance. So I'd be glad to answer any other questions you have.
Okay, well, that's perfect segue, Jeff. You did my job. Questions?
Okay.
Questions from anyone? Nancy. And Tasha, I'll get to you next. Nancy, you're muted.
The drawings that were provided with the proposal, is that all of the additional landscaping that's going to be added?
Yes, it pretty much shows all of it. There is some existing landscaping with some trees and lawn on the other sides of the property. It doesn't really show, well, there's some lawn there on the trees there and then lawn on the corner. We focus more on the front of the building. And we actually have to, as part of the entry, provide ADA access from the sidewalk. So we're doing quite a bit of concrete and sidewalk work up against the entry there. And that would give us an opportunity to add landscaping. None of it was really required. Aaron just wanted to provide it and enhance the building and the development. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, maybe a little more than you asked.
Right. I was just concerned that the landscaping that is there already would remain.
Yes, it will remain.
Okay.
Yep.
Has there been a decision from the design excellence review?
Right now, in fact, as of yesterday, we've been in contact with them. There was one item left for the design excellence review that we answered yesterday, and it was a fairly minor question about the metal siding at the vestibule entry and having that complement and work with the metal on the Papa John's and the Rada paint entries, and it does match that. So I feel like we answered their question. I think we're very close to having that approved and so that we can move on. And Annette, I'm not sure if you have anything to add there.
Well, I'll just add that I sit on the Design Excellence Review Committee in an advisory capacity, and yesterday morning spoke about this project. And as Jeff mentioned, there was a little bit of discussion about the material samples had been submitted, but there was still a little bit of question about compatibility between the entrance on Brook Street versus the entrances off of the parking lot. And I think that those, I think the sentiment that I was getting from the committee yesterday was that with answers to those simple questions, it would be approved. So I guess we don't have formal approval, but it's, as Jeff said, very close, and I don't expect that there are any outstanding major issues that would be a surprise to anybody.
The trash collection is in the back of the building, which is where the alley is. Is there any part of this project that would encourage the tenants in the building to recycle whatever can be recycled?
We are adding screening to the trash bins in the alley, and that's the extent of our scope. I'm sure with Dr. McDonough, we could encourage the tenants to provide recycled containers. But other than that, I don't think any of that's been addressed. I will say that with the deconstruction of that marquee and the existing building for preparing it for the new construction, we will be conscious and careful and recycle any materials that we can. In fact, that marquee that's coming down, most of the framing of it is metal, and we plan on recycling that and being sensitive and conscious of that. So
Thank you.
Tasha, did you have something?
Yeah, comment and then a question. So comment first would be, I really like this project in its location and in the change in orientation as it faces the street. And so it's great to see how redevelopment stimulates other redevelopment. And we're seeing that Brooks corridor redeveloped from, I'm going to call the bookends being for this segment, at least in my mind, being the fairgrounds to South Crossing, where Cabela's and other businesses have improved that area. So I really like this location. I also like that the side of that building that faces the street was but not very compelling and is being much improved in my opinion. The question though relates to the staff's analysis of the Brooks Corridor infrastructure study. So Annette, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. So as you're aware, there is the Brooks Corridor study proposes a center running bus rapid transit on Brook Street. The right-of-way is very constrained north of Paxson, which I believe Paxson is right here. So it's actually north of Ernest. So this is in a location where there is constrained right-of-way. We don't know the full extent of right-of-way impacts at this point. That's something that's being considered. However, in analysis of this, it appears that, so there are numerous curb cuts into this property right now. And the long-term, the hope is that some of these curb cuts might be able to be consolidated. And if that happened, that certainly still would work with this property. If there were some property or some right-of-way impacts, there is an excess of, I think, 20 parking spaces that, so versus what's required, I think it's required for these uses to have about 40 parking spaces, and they have about 60 plus parking spaces out there now. So if there ever were a need to talk about right-of-way and reconfiguring of parking, there's still plenty of opportunity to make that happen. So the right-of-way impacts would not encroach on the building at all. So we don't have a great deal of certainty.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We don't have a great deal of certainty exactly where property, if there are right-of-way impacts, we don't have a great deal of certainty exactly where they would be, but we do have certainty that it would not impact the building and would maintain adequate amount of parking if necessary. And
So in a bigger picture response, every request that we have come to us on Brooks, particularly north of Paxson, that's kind of the first filter that we put it through. Before we consider anything else, because there's obviously no point in investing public funds in a project that may well require a taking, if that's what it came to get adequate right away. So,
and it looked to me like already the handicap parking was being moved to the other area of parking because the landscaping now occupies some of that area. Is that true?
Actually, partially true. There is the access from the sidewalk that parallels Brooks. That possibly could be impacted if the right-of-way was expanded. Actual ADA parking and access from the parking stalls would not be. And that's correct that we are overparked for this use, fully occupied about 21 spaces. So there is, it's pretty rare when you have a site that actually has more parking than required, but this is one of them. So it does give opportunity in the future to negotiate that and still have the building be viable per parking requirements.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? So I have one that has to do with the slide that's in front of us that has the elevation with and without assistance. Is the size of the signage for Papa John's and for Rhoda Paint on the proposed elevation with MRA assistance, is that accurate? Is that how big the signage will be?
I don't believe so, Carl. I think those are placeholders. The locations of the signage is approximately where we want it to be, but the actual scale and size, it has not been defined yet.
Okay. Dr. McDonough or Jeff, are you guys contemplating any sort of agreement with those two tenants to keep the size to, something that's tasteful? That's.
I definitely think we will. Aaron, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, we've spoken. So neither of those tenants are owner operated, right? They're all managed by kind of central groups. And when we spoke to both central groups about doing site updates and kind of the proposed changes, the comment was, oh, this is an opportunity that we could probably do some updating on our signage. So I would expect, I mean, they're still going to be in brand. I mean, Papa John's sign is their brand, and so it's still going to be a pizza sign. Rhoda Paint, I think they were planning on doing some new signage as well.
Yeah, and my concern's always that we put money into the facades of buildings and then cover it with big ugly signs or big signs, whether they're ugly or not.
So if I could, with the change in the facade, I would imagine, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm 99% sure that this will have to go through a sign package review. And I think that probably design excellence as well as the city sign codes will come into play because of the location.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you agree?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
We'll have to be in compliance with all the city ordinances and the design excellence. So that's correct.
So we've got some safety nets.
Okay. All righty. We like safety nets. Anything else from anyone? If not, is there a motion? Someone?
Sorry, I clicked out of it. I'll make the motion here. Hold on one second.
Now that we have to read them, it takes some steps.
I will move to approve a facade improvement program grant to Align Properties LLC in an amount not to exceed $50,000 for exterior renovation of the building located at 3100 Brook Street, pending final design excellence review and other city permit approvals, and with the stipulation that reimbursement will be made at the conclusion of the project under submission of required lien releases and proof of expenditures, and authorize the chair to sign the development agreement.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I can second it.
All right. Is there any either further board or any public comment? Ruth.
I would like to comment that I say that I think that this really is a good project and I appreciate it. I was going to ask about the design excellence, so thank you, Nancy, for that. And also, thank you, Annette, for the comments in the staff analysis about the Brooks corridor study and for your expansion on that for Tasha's question. So I appreciate the landscaping a lot and the upgrade on the windows to make it more energy efficient. I think it's a good project and I thank you for that and would have happily made the motion, but I don't have it in front of me, so.
All right. Jill, anybody do we have anybody that wants to make any public comment?
Carl, I'm not seeing anybody with their hand raised.
All right. Well, we'll give people just a minute here. Still seeing none, Joe?
Still seeing none.
All right. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Thank you both. Good luck with your project. You're welcome to stay at the meeting, but you certainly don't have to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so we will now move on to Union Block restoration. And I think this is Chris, this is you, right?
Yeah, this is me.
Excuse
just
me.
have- I'll do a
Excuse me. Carl, could I raise a point of order on this, please?
Sure.
As to whether this is properly before the board. I'm sorry to do it. It's a great project. I'm just think raise the point of order for you to address.
Okay. And what is that, I guess?
Well, the fact that this is a second request for a project that when it was considered in September of 2019 was discussed as the only request that would come before the board, that the 30% contingency for this proposal was a hefty contingency, and that the 30% contingency was a worst case scenario for the facade work that's being done and presented again.
Okay. Well,
Can we address that as part of the staff report? Or is there a concern that there is a point of order that it should not be addressed or it should not be discussed, period, or on the agenda?
well, that's my question, and Nancy, I don't know if I'm quite doing this according to all of the specifics of Robert's Rules of Order, but it seems to me that your point goes to the substance rather than whether or not it's properly before us. I mean, you raised a good point about whether or not we want to approve it, but I think that we have a request that the staff vetted, and we can discuss it, can't we?
I agree with that. I thought it was important to raise it.
I think it is important to raise it, but I'm gonna say, unless somebody wants to challenge it, that goes to the substance of it, and so let's take it up.
Before we do that, though, I mean, so Ellen, was yours a question as to whether that issue had been adequately addressed in the memo? Because I guess if it hasn't, then I would rather there be a tabling of this and a consideration of the specific issue raised by Nancy. And I apologize if it is addressed, and
I think to an extent it is addressed, but I also believe that we have some enhancements to speaking to that issue that are not in the agenda that was sent out a couple of days ago. I guess my recommendation, if I was asked for one, and I haven't been, would be that we discuss this issue. If you feel like there is more public notice or that it has not been properly noticed, it could be tabled for action at a subsequent meeting, but I would encourage you to have the discussion and the presentation.
okay.
And I think it's mentioned enough to where we can get into it now, and then if we want to have, if we want more detailed information after that discussion, we can decide what to do. And let me just say that, and maybe this is something that I should say when we talk about the substance, is that I went back and looked at the minutes of the meeting, and there was discussion about it being the only request. There was discussion about the healthy contingency. There was a specific question, I think by Tasha, saying, is this the only request we're going to get? And then Chris said, yes. But then later on, there seemed to be some pullback from that. So I think we were a little equivocal before, or got a little equivocal answers. And I'm going to say, at least for now, that was enough to open the door to have this discussion. So with that, unless somebody else wants to, I don't want to be heavy-handed here, but with that, unless someone else has anything else to add, turn it over to Chris to talk about it. And Chris, in case you didn't notice, we're going to have to discuss both the substance and the procedure here.
That's fine. That'd be fine. I'm trying to think of where to start now. I guess well, we'll start at the beginning. How's that sound?
That's always a good place to start.
All right.
That's not the beginning. That's the beginning of the bad part.
There we go. Is that better?
We can see it. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good. That's what I can't see what you can see. So, all right. So this is basically the condition the property was in when the owner came to see us fall before last. What had happened is that he and his partner had purchased the building, figured they'd put $200,000 or $300,000 into redoing the inside, and then be able to modernize the offices and so on, be able to move forward. After they had done some of the work in the front to find that there was actually a facade behind this property, or behind the metal facade, they came to you, asked for permission to proceed to look at a little bit more. And they got to about this point, so they came to us a month later and also had found a rendering that showed what a spectacular historic piece for downtown Missoula that had been covered up in the 1950s. In looking at this portion right here, or in the very beginning, in the middle there, it looked like that between that and uncovering some windows on the inside, that most of the facade should be intact, and there were some guesses on how to move forward. Should mention that price tag for the interior has gone up 10 times. So after about a month of peering under panels and removing interior walls, finding the rendering, they found that the building, as constructed in 1900, was a Queen Anne style, incorporated different materials than anywhere else in the downtown, brought in from a good portion of the country. The actual payment and the way we've done the TIF here is very, very similar to a special process involving historic preservation or historic facade conservation easement that we used at the Wilma in their facade, and also at the Mercantile Pharmacy facade. I think what has been found as they began to actually take off more of the facade was that there was two things. One, there's a lot more there than three things. There was a lot more there than they thought. Second, the building was not built the way it showed in the rendering, or that there'd been subsequent damage from fire or something and rebuilt unofficially with no recordation. So there were more things on the building and absent from the building that they had any idea or could have known at all. They also found that the condition of a lot of the windows and so on were a lot worse than they thought. So I mentioned in my memo, and Nick mentioned in his letter, that there were a number of surprises, both good and kind of disappointing. So what they found was that this is the picture that you saw last, or fall before last, that the kind of railing along the top, if you will, the widow's walk, didn't ever exist. The cornice was very different. In finding other pictures that we'll look at in a minute, they found that the big capitals up on top there were different, much more pronounced. So they needed to move to a different kind of material that increased cost.
Chris, let me interrupt you for a minute. What did you call those?
I call them capitals. That's the architectural term that I had to look up. So basically the top to the columns there.
Okay.
So that the big pieces that are sticking up above the top of the roof line there. And then there's a series of other capitals. Those would be down lower on the kind of attached columns or pilasters that were all, nobody had any idea that those were there either. Those are carved granite. So you end up with a rendering now that the architect has put together for us, that, and I hope you're able to, you're not going to be able to zoom in on this, but you have this in your packet. If you zoom into some of the wording here, you can talk about the cornice work that was on top that they didn't know about, and the marble banding, the carved wood above the doors, the storefront retail doors on the ground floor, and the mullions, the big pieces of wood, carved wood that separated the windows on both the first and second floor. That is the carved banding. So that's a capital. It was, and you can see the piece of wood at the bottom that covered that up. No way to see it. Same here. This is part of that, the top of the capital down about on the first floor. So that's the top of the column. Found the column, had no idea there was carved granite on top of it. These are the mullions that were talked about in the memo, and Nick did too. And you can see truly buried unless you moved an awful lot of equipment or a lot of materials. And then some of them not in good shape. Original thought was a lot of the masonry would be in place in the windows, as were the windows that were uncovered in the first testings. Before they got into it so far that they would have started to violate the proceed without prejudice thing. So a lot more work needed to go into that. That's where the contingency went there. And in changes of materials, such as finding this picture, this panorama to the north that shows those projections above the roof, the capitals up on top of the roof that were much different than that was shown in the rendering that they had originally had. That led them to change their idea of what the material needed to be for that, and make them both long lasting and the size and shape that were intended by the original architect. So they changed that from a high density foam kind of material to fiberglass. Those kind of things, having to actually manufacture new ones, that's where the contingency went. That and going into the brick and so on. So yep, it costs a lot more. So you can see we've already installed the pieces up on top. They're starting to put together the cornice work on this, and they still, and you can see where the capitals are, that were, many of which were hammered off to allow the wood structure for under the metal panel. So there was a coating of the metal panel, and then the wood structure. Once you got past that, then you found those carved granite pieces. So I think there's if this was considered and approved, you'd be looking at a total assistance package of $704,858, which is an amount that's roughly similar of all the various help that went into the Wilma. A lot of that was code compliance. and into the Florence, which is also a lot of code compliance and is a much larger building, but that's the kind of the scale of scope of the project. I emailed you a list of things that the staff put together to help differentiate facade renovation of landmark historic buildings from other kind of projects that have asked for additional assistance, like forgetting to put in demolition costs and engineers not understanding that they needed to talk to utilities about the cost of their extensions. I've also done a cursory search of all the projects on my computer, which there are a few. And I found that the board has approved additional assistance in two kinds of projects in the past. For one, which is much smaller, are times that developers come back in and have something else to offer. For instance, a trail easement or additional sidewalk that became evident that they could use to improve handicap accessibility. The easements might include the stairway by D.A. Davidson, the trail at Draft Works, and the trail at the former Meadow Gold Dairy. By far, a majority of them have been in historic building renovations, and those include some public ones, including Hellgate High School windows, doubled, County Courthouse exterior and Indian interior historic preservation renovations. The headquarters building on West Front Street doubled, mainly. It was another one of the buildings that was clad in metal and ceramic in that case. And when that was peeled off, again, found things that they had no idea could have been underneath there but would have been a shame to lose. The Bon Marché copper awning. The Elks Club building was a code compliance project, but we allowed more to improve, although it's still not perfect, the appearance of the fire escape from the second and third floor buildings, but it's an appearance deal. The Glein building on West Front Street to help remediate car batteries. Pioli building right next door to it to remove soils to allow expansion of the building, or the building would not have been able to use. The Wilma Cornice work came back, as well as did their CCP for code compliance program, excuse me, for a doorway that needed to get cut through concrete in the back. Another one was the Knights of Columbus, now College Music Society building on Pine Street, which ended up with exterior lead paint that needed to get removed. That was one that was quite important to Ron McDonald to rectify. And another one, what we've called the Mortan building, another one on East Pine Street, an old large residential to commercial renovation that it was a fire code deal, but it was a parapet that was required by the fire department that would have resulted in the removal of the building off of the National List of Historic Places. And going back in time again, and I looked at 3 different historic resource surveys over time, 1981, and then 2 later ones, the last one, which resulted in the creation of an historic district in the downtown. None of the 3 mentioned this facade underneath this. The 1981 survey mentioned that there could be a brick facade, probably ruined. And so in the last one, that this building was considered a contributing factor for that district. And in fact, so unknown was underneath here that the State Historic Preservation Office, you ought to know, has been very reluctant to putting this on the national list because the metal facade was what was the contributing factor, not this gorgeous building. So I think there's some precedent that is here beyond what we all might have thought we knew a year and a half ago. Obviously we didn't. And I think that there are good, both emotional and solid reasons to be able to move forward and finish this project the way that it was intended. That's what I've got. Both the owner, Nick Karras, and his architect, David Gray, are online here.
Okay, well, we can see David. Do you have anything to add? Oh, we can see Nick now too.
There we go.
Right. Either one of you gentlemen have anything to add to Chris's report?
Yeah. Nick, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Sure, I'll go first, and then Dave's a lot smarter than me, so he can be a little more specific. Yeah, so basically, we thought that we had plenty of funds for this facade project, and the project just grew in scope and scale, and we just discovered a far more ornate building underneath. And I think regardless, we're going to come out with a great product. It's going to be an amazing building and a great asset to the city. But you know, I think once we discovered what was there, we elevated kind of our ambition too, in terms of going for, you know, I think the objective we stated for ourselves was, you know, let's envision we're in a competition for doing a historic restoration. How would we go about this, and how would we tackle this project? And so, you know, what we wanted to do is take things where we originally kind of planned and thought, you know, here's a good value engineer option that can result in a good historic looking end product, to, you know, really trying to recreate the facade in the same way it was built originally, in terms of using more craftsmen, better custom woodwork, and obviously better custom granite work is another thing that we're hoping to do, simply because we didn't know it was there. But I'd say on the whole, I'm really proud of what we've done so far, and I just want to get it over the finish line as perfect as we can possibly make it. And we do need more funding to kind of hit that level that I know the entire team wants to meet. But I also, you know, I'm sensitive to the fact that the MRA has been extremely generous to us in the first go around, and I totally remember the don't come back with an additional request also. And so when I called Chris up, I was like, hey, I know you told me not to do this, but, you know, we really need the funds, and I think we do, and I think it's worthwhile, and I also think it's timely. You know, we need to move forward sooner than later. Obviously, I know there's a lot of considerations that you guys take in under, but that's kind of my pitch, and I'll turn it over to Dave. He can speak more specifically about the different items.
Okay, so I'm David Gray. So some of the stuff we had, so there was a contingency in the original budget, which is a very smart thing to have, especially in a historic renovation. And we use that contingency on the north facade where we were supposed to use that contingency on the north facade. I've taken the metal and other retrofitted facades off of historic buildings and restored them before. The La Flèche building be a really good example, where Downtown Dance Collective was. Same kind of metal, windows were moved. We found some stuff underneath that we had to fix. But this one, they're all unique. So like we assumed 4 inches of masonry was taken off of the cornice. They usually just roto-hammered anything that projected past the building or looked decent, filled it in with block or CMU, and they called it good. This building, they cut the structural wall off 6 feet from the roof. And so there is 4 inches of masonry that existed basically on the whole front of that building. So what we thought was going to be 4 inches of facade and brick improvement and tying that back, we found out we had to reconstruct the entire upper half of the masonry wall before we could even put the nice new cornice back on it. We found the capitals. This was exciting. So just to take a step back, as we were pulling the metal off of the facade of that building, it was like a slow motion Christmas. Every day you got to see something new exposed. And when they started to pull off the columns, we only knew what was up about 8 feet. That was it. We knew over the central stair, we pulled some things off because we actually thought there was a roof there that ended up not being a roof, but we found some old photos that said maybe that was there, and that wasn't the case. And it started to expose some real beauty underneath that metal facade. So as we pulled the metal facade off, starting on the east side of the building, they started to uncover carved capitals, which we had no idea was there. They're beautiful. They're right on the storefront person range. When you're walking down the sidewalk, this is what you're going to see. But since it was kind of out with the old, in with the new, they literally took sledgehammers and they just pounded the sides of the capitals off so that their pre-made porcelain panel could fit around it. We didn't know they existed. It would be a shame to go this far in the building and not try to bring that back. It's craftsmanship work. It's not for your average mason. We have an amazing mason on this job. The cornice work, bricklaying in this. Have you guys ever looked at a brick? It looks nice and square and perfect. The joints between the bricks on this building is 1/8 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch. So that slight difference from baking a brick, when they're that close together, they had to hand select every brick to make sure it matched contour of the brick bolt. So we're talking some extreme craftsmanship that went into the upper facade work. So, to not take that level of care to the end, to me, is doing the Missoula downtown a disservice. We didn't know that the granite capitals were there, and they're damaged and they need to be repaired. But more importantly, on top of that, that has a healthy number to it. I mean, that's like $32,000, I think. They have to CNC carve those panels after they 3D scan. There's one. We found one that is broken, but we have the two pieces. So we're going to glue it together. They're going to 3D scan it, and then they're going to carve matching capitals, which then they can put back on this. So we can recreate those capitals back to where they should be. We thought there was one, maybe two wood mullions left. We thought basically that the historic storefront just didn't exist. So there was no reason to try to mimic or recreate it. Old buildings have aluminum storefront in it all the time. That's what we planned on doing because there was nothing to preserve. We couldn't mimic the old, put in windows, make it nice, look it clean. It'll be a nice office space. When we pulled that metal off, we found 19 to 20 of the historic mullions. Most bays have the historic mullions on the sides. With those mullions, we actually found the actual sill of the second floor windows. So we know where the sill plate actually is. We were able to pull out one mullion. And so we're able to recreate the molding, the heights of the windows. I mean, do a real historic reconstruction of that front. And these mullions are amazing. They are not a piece of 2x4 aluminum extruded, clean, modern window component. They are hand carved. They're full. They're like 9.5 inches thick hardwood at the bottom with this beautiful scroll in them. You go up about another 8 feet and they have another full scroll detailed piece at the top where the side windows came in, the horizontal windows. They have another detailed piece at the top. They are unmatched in architectural character to anything in the downtown. So knowing that that is there and it exists to a far greater extent than we ever dreamed possible, to me, it would be a real disservice not to try to bring that all back to Missoula. So that is an additional architectural feature, if you will, that would come with the preservation of this building. Nobody has done more to preserve downtown than the MRA. We wouldn't have one restored building without the MRA. We just don't want to come up short. on this one. The MRA, you were very generous. We really appreciate what you've done. You made this facade restoration possible, but you know, that's the beginning of the process. Your fund said we could go to the next step and go into design and really dig into the building and try to find everything we could to restore the facade. So our base contract for construction is more than $100,000 more than the MRA was offering in the beginning, which was in essence our entire facade restoration budget was what the MRA gave. But just from where we started with the MRA to the next level of finding out what needed to be built and how big the building actually was, all of that information. So we automatically started off $100,000 more. The third floor windows, from what was exposed and a lot of stuff that was buried, when we went to replace the upper windows, the walls started to crumble anywhere from 3 to 4 layers of brick thick, depending on the wall. So we literally had to reconstruct every window hole around the entire third floor. And that's not contingency money. Contingency money we could only spend on the facade. So that added another $120,000 in restoration work. And we're not going back to the MRA and asking for those things. Those are costs that the owner has taken on as known things through construction. But on the north facade, and this only deals with the north facade, you know, we found these beautiful, beautiful capitals. There's nothing in the downtown that's like them. We would like to get them restored, and we're going to need the MRA help because we burned the extra we had and all those other unforeseen things that you get into in historic restoration. We found these most amazing storefront windows on the first floor and the second floor, and there is a lot of them. It would be just a shame to not bring that first and second floor, that street level that people see and pay attention to not bring it back to what it was. That would just, it'd be falling short. So that's what we're asking help for. Just those 2 items. The owners have absorbed everything else, is in the hundreds of thousands, but it's just these 2 items because they benefit Missoula downtown the most.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sure we'll have some questions or some discussion. So who wants to lead it off?
Chair,
Sure.
if it's all right with you, I'll ask a quick one. So we just have to, you know, looking at this memo saying that these costs would have to be paid out of next year's budget as well, likely, right? Because this district does not have that many funds, as we have so many exciting projects going on. So I just wanted to like clarify what is the like but for, what is the, if this is not passed today, what happens to these features if you don't have this additional investment?
Sure. Well, we don't have more funds, and so we did get a construction loan, but essentially, as David said, I've had to go back to my investors, and they've been probably the best group of investors I've ever worked with, because our initial forecast was, you know, a quarter of what the, you know, the total outlay was. And so I've had to go back to them both for, you know, some of these facade restoration and mechanical upgrades, and then the interior build out. I would love to show anybody that wants to see the office spaces we've done. They're almost as incredible as the outside. The interior is really nice. Long story short, I think the investor group's tapped out, and so I don't know how we would handle it, but we probably have to make some compromises in terms of materials in order to get a finished product, and we have to finish the product anyway. But I think we can bridge with financing. I'm doubtful that I can go back to my investors and say, hey, I also need another, you know, $130,000, and so that's kind of where it is. But I mean, I haven't had that specific conversation yet. So.
Okay.
So if just to clarify, it sounds like if this is not approved, there will be substandard materials used for some of this restoration, or what in your opinion is substandard. The authenticity of the restoration would be compromised with respect to these two items that you didn't anticipate being there or could not have. Is that accurate? I mean, I guess what Mel's asking, and what I think Mel's asking is, what's the effect if you're standing across the street? What are we going to get if we don't approve this additional funding? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think the granite is a easy answer. It'll just still be in its current appearance, which is all broken. And, you know, I think my hope is that we would maybe kick the can down the street and be able to restore it at a future date. In terms of the, you know, the storefronts and all the woodwork that needs to be done, I think that's probably, you know, it needs to be replaced, and you know, we need to move forward so that we can lease that space and so that the building can be viable. But yeah, I think it's going to be a substandard. It won't be as good a project, and I really hope that we can avoid that. You know, I think this is one of the last buildings we have, and I don't want to do it wrong. And so, I don't know. I can't give you just a straight answer. This is what the path is, but I do think it's going to be a different product than if we have the funds.
Well, I look at what we found when we pulled the metal off of that building, and I can't help but wonder what's under the metal on Stockman's bar.
Nancy, and you're muted. There we go.
I've got it. Well, approaching this from a different aspect to bring something else up for the discussion. Is the historic preservation facade easement, was that filed?
Ellen?
Chris, I think that's for you. I doubt it's been done until we finish the project.
I couldn't understand what you said, actually.
Has the easement been filed?
Was the easement filed, the facade easement, was it filed?
Yes, it has been, yes.
Okay, does the facade easement describe, is the easement for only the second and third floors, or does it include the entire facade?
The entire facade.
And who's responsible for maintaining the facade?
The owner.
Okay, so what are the city's obligations under the easement?
The city needs to inspect it from time to time through the city's historic preservation office and bring any deficiencies or issues to the owner. And then there's a methodology of working through any needs that need to get done. If there's going to be any changes to the facade after it's deemed complete, then that has to go through be approved by the city.
There are two items that make up this $125,000. Are those bids or are those estimates, or what are they? Where do the figures come from to make up the 125,000?
That's the contractor's numbers.
Okay.
As a bid?
And what?
I just want to make sure he said
Yeah.
the contractor's numbers, and I want to know if that's a bid or an estimate.
Yeah, no, so that's the change order cost, added cost to do the historic windows, and mason's cost to repair the granite.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I should mention that there's a total of 3. I rolled the window framing and the mullions since they're kind of with the building together.
Okay.
And are those bid costs for those additional, for the mullions?
Right, all 3.
Right, but I'm asking David if
Okay.
those are bid costs on the mullions too.
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, all the numbers we got are directly from the contractor for the cost of what it would take.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, Nancy.
That's okay. how confident are you in these numbers?
The contractor's been doing a very good job so far. We've been able to, everything we've known about, we've been able to stay within budget. And so it's the things that we didn't know about where we have the shuffling. But basically the design team and the owner and the contractor have been as flexible as possible to come up with the best solutions for the building and the project and to make sure we don't fall short for what the MRA expected of us.
Okay. In looking at what is
Wait a
called.
minute, Nancy, can I interrupt?
Yep.
I appreciate that answer, but it didn't really answer the question. How are these are these real numbers? Is this it on the numbers?
Yeah, these are the real numbers. Excuse me. These are the real numbers from the contractor,
And
from
you're
the windows.
confident that you won't get overruns on those numbers?
As much as I can be on a renovation, yeah. So he's got the sizes of all the window holes now because we can actually see where the brick is. Well, yeah, based on what he's given me for the costs, that's what these are breaking down to. These are those costs.
Is everything exposed that needs to be exposed to know what you need to do to the front of that building?
Yeah, we can actually see, we're pulled, everything is pulled out enough that I had to redraw the entire front facade from the original work based on the actual dimensions we were able to take since the structure is exposed.
Okay, again, Nancy, I apologize for interrupting.
Okay. In looking at what has been identified as the original rendering, it seems to me that some of these items that we're discussing, the mullions and the pilasters and their headings, are in that picture. But I just wanted to make that observation that in anticipating expenses, I don't know that was taken into consideration, even though it was covered up. Let me ask another question. When the building is completely rehabilitated, what are the projections for use and occupancy?
Nick, I think that's to you.
Yeah, Nick, do you want to answer that one of tenants you have looking at the building?
Sure. So we have 5 retail spaces, and currently one's food bev, one's retail, like a makeup store, Smooch Cosmetics, and then we have 3 vacancies, and we received 2 signed letters of intent. I don't want to disclose who they are just yet, but great tenants. We're thrilled to have them if things go how I think they will. The second floor is Missoula County. That's their planning department, and I think we're working on an extension, so they'll be around for a while. They're great tenants. And then on the 3rd floor, we have a law firm that just signed a contract for one of the leases, and then on the west side of the 3rd floor, also office space. So the 2nd, 3rd floor are all office space. We have a freight company signed a long-term lease, and then with COVID, they had some troubles, and so they asked to buy out of their lease, which we granted. And we've had a lot of interest and continued discussion, so I think we'll release that pretty quickly. So hopefully all the office space will be leased in the next 6 months, and same with the retail space. It's, I think it's a really attractive corner with the AC opening next door. And then the last component is the basement, which is a really cool space in its own right. So like much of downtown Missoula, they had basement level retail suites. So they'd have like the staircase down, kind of like by where the Rhino is, staircase down, and then they had retail suites And we still have the doorways and windows, even though all the sidewalks been filled in. And it's high ceiling, I think probably 10 or 12 feet. And so we're looking at what we can do to make that usable space at the minimum storage for like bicycles and things like that, and possibly creating a way to bring more natural light down there and maybe make it usable, as office space or some creative space. So our focus so far has been office and now retail. And then I think at some point in the future, we'll tackle the basement once we get this property stabilized.
Congratulations. It sounds like a successful project for you.
Thanks. Knock on wood, we'll see.
Right. In the basement, when we're talking about that, is there any part of the project that encourages tenants to recycle or makes it easy for them to recycle their daily operating recycling?
Yeah. God, I don't have an answer. I think we have a recycling bin over there, but I could check with my property manager real quickly. So I don't know. But obviously I have to believe we do. There's no way that the county wouldn't need one anyway. So I'm almost positive, but I can't give the answer there. It's kind of dumb.
Okay. In looking at the budget for the district, of course, we do not have the money, and we have just to note, we have other projects that are in the works for which we need to be careful about funding in this district. I guess for the staff, what other projects do you see coming forward? Oh, first, what projects do you see coming forward for funding in the district? And then secondly, I guess maybe Jill could answer whether recent projects are included yet in the budget for source of funds, tax increment funds, like the mercantile or radius. And if they're not included, when do you expect them to be included?
So Jill, why don't we tackle that first, then go to Ellen and Chris about what do you anticipate coming?
Okay, so I am looking at the Front Street budget, the report, the Rainbow Report. And I can put that up on the screen if that's more helpful.
No, we got it.
Okay. So Nancy, to answer your question, I'm just looking down at our projects that we have budgeted in the FY21 budget. So the AC Marriott Hotel is anticipated to be a bond. We've got just a small amount left in there for the Levasseur Street project that hasn't been expended. We were able to put the full amounts that we pledged to the Union Block and the Wren Hotel into the FY21 budget after we got our final numbers. We have the full amount that we paid for the public library contribution. We've been doing 75,000, up to 75,000 per year is how that's written. And so I have the full 75 in there for this fiscal year. We have that $25,000 that we had in there for planning for the Payne Library block.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jill, I wasn't clear with my question. I'm more concerned about revenue.
That's what I thought.
And the revenue. So the revenue, as you can see up above, we have $120,000 into that district so far. We do have, those existing debt service clearing funds need to be filled when that revenue comes in. And because the timing of the Front Street parking garage debt service, those have to be filled right away. So that's why you're not seeing a higher number in that percentage of revenue received so far, because the revenue that comes in the fall needs to fill those debt service funds first. So unless we see something that is going to affect the revenue on for the remainder of the year, the second half, due to COVID, which I'm not sure if anybody can really predict, We took into the effect of the appeals. We spoke with DOR, and you can see that adjustment down below with our contingency. And that did include the appeal on the MERC. So other than that,
But all the projects, all of the projects are in there, correct? On the revenue. In other words, the MERC isn't coming online halfway through the year, or AC isn't coming online halfway through the year that would impact the revenue. Is that what you're saying?
I think we're going to see and Ellen can jump in here too. We're going to see some revenue coming in from AC. What that projection is from DOR, I don't know if Ellen has had those conversations, and the ratio between what our debt service is going to need to be for that project and how much is excess. We anticipated there'd be more on the MERC. But then if there was an appeal on that, so I'm not sure if the timing from last January when that would, if we had the full value of the MERC on. Ellen, do you recall?
We did not.
So then
okay, go ahead and finish.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
If I could speak to that, the AC is basically done. The hotel, we've gotten interest rates just this week from Stockman Bank that are extremely favorable on the debt service for that. I think it's safe to assume that as of January 1st, the majority of that value was in place for that facility. It's been turned over to the owners by the contractor already, and it's just now February. So I haven't talked with DOR about how they valued it January 1st, but our very conservative estimate of tax revenue from that project, and now we know what debt service is going to be. There's an $80,000 swing to the good, and that's a real conservative, what I think is a very conservative estimate of what the property taxes will be on that project. So that's just one project.
And that sorry to interrupt, but that's not reflected in that 80,000 swing is not reflected in the revenue estimate, correct?
It is not reflected in the revenue estimates. It is not reflected in the expenditures. We did not know what debt service would be. You've got AC in the budget basically identified as a line item, and if you look across there, you do not see a
right. Okay, thank you.
So we know what debt service is going to be on that. We have our estimates of what taxable value, the incremental taxes will be, and so we're 80,000 to the positive. The other thing to be noted here is we've got 488,000 and change in the budget for the Wren Hotel. We know that will not be completed this fiscal year, so that's going to carry over to FY22 before that'll be paid out. What we see coming up the pike, the one thing that I'm aware of that has not quantified an ask from us, but no doubt there will be, is Karis Park improvements. We're looking at, there's an RFP out right now for engineering on Front Main. That will be an expenditure that will be asked for from TIF funds. There's an RFP out right now for a process to evaluate what happens with Higgins Avenue from Broadway to Brooks, which will be another one of those kind of cobbled together efforts that will have funding from multiple sources. Right now, none has been asked of us, but I know how these deals work. So we do have some things on the horizon that will be asking for TIF funding as far as actual brick and mortar projects. There's nothing that's coming to mind right this minute. And Chris, you may know of something that I don't, or I may be totally forgetting about something.
Just I think at some point, certainly not in the next fiscal year, the pain block, something will happen there, but that's probably at least 2 years away.
So what?
At the earliest. And then there's some other properties being in flux in the Kiwanis Park neighborhood. I don't think There's nothing too big, but I just know that it is happening. So nothing concrete, no.
Yeah, I mean, there's a possible reuse of what I call the McLaughlin House, which is the house that's right next to the Wornoth that we built on, off of Lavasser Street. But there's absolutely nothing that's solid yet. They're people sniffing around.
Okay, Nancy, does that answer your question?
Just is the tax revenue from Radius Gallery, is that included in the revenue estimate?
Was it 100? It wouldn't have been 100% on in January of 20, would it?
No, they opened in March last year, so there was a partial on that one. The full amount will be as of the this year's taxes. It was about 80% anyway, though.
Okay.
But I mean,
Thank
in
you.
the sense of full disclosure, we never know what value DOR is going to put on a partially completed project. And we've had some surprises along the way. So my assumption that they're at 95% on the AC, I would hope that's accurate, but we haven't verified that with them.
All right. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
Carl.
anybody else?
I mean, so the question in my mind is, I'm mindful that we have turned folks away who have come to us for the second time. And Mr. Gray, Nick, good job hiring that guy. Because your enthusiasm for what has been revealed through your project is compelling. And so I guess I'm asking myself whether our general rule, which is to not entertain second requests, whether there is an exception for historic preservation projects. And whether there are unique difficulties that are a part of such projects that would justify a departure from a general rule, which I think is a good one, which is you get to come to us once. Because in every project, there are unexpected items and obstacles, errors that could justify any project owner coming back and saying, we didn't quite anticipate this or that, please help us some more. But when I think about what our core values are that should guide us on how we are deploying public funds at MRA, historic preservation seems like one of those core values, similar to our commitment to affordable housing. And so I guess I'd ask staff to provide some, and I'm looking at some information that you provided to us, to talk a little bit about what the importance of historic preservation to MRA's participation in projects such as downtown projects, and then the unique challenges that may justify a departure for such projects as compared to others.
Could I jump in real quickly on that? I had a conversation with Carl earlier in the week, and it revolved around just this topic. And I think some of the recent requests that we've had in the last 3 or 4 years for additional funding are pretty front and center in folks' mind right now, and as they should be. And we've said no. We said no to 2 big projects in one single meeting a while back. Those were things that were oversights on the part of the applicant. Those were not things that should not or could not have been known. They were simply oversights on the part of their consultants or on their part, doesn't matter. So I woke up in the middle of the night and my brain was going on this historic restoration and preservation issue. And So Chris and I sat down and we hammered through, the series of kind of bullets, findings, considerations that I believe he sent out to you guys earlier today. And I think, my recommendation to the board is that when we take on funding a historic preservation or restoration project of this nature or the nature of the Wilma, or even if Stockman's comes along and wants to pull all that metal, that awful metal off the front of that building, that we don't treat it the same way as we do your typical project where a building's being torn down or we know what's there and it's, may or may not be worth restoring or saving, but you can't know. Renovation projects are a problem anyway, usually on the inside, but when you're restoring a historic building, and particularly one that was as disguised as this one was, it's just, it's impossible. So I think we need to go into these as, if you choose to do so, as projects which will have a continuation potentially. And they don't have the same rules applied to them. Because I tend sometimes to be more of a purist than is practical. But if you're going to restore it, by golly, restore it. If you can afford to do that. If you can't, do the best you can. And I think what we're hearing here is we'd like to restore it. If we have to, we'll do the best we can, but it's not going to be the best that we could do. And Chris came up with a number of examples that he gave you during his report of historic preservation projects that we have used public funds to help support, that have in fact had to come back to the board when new information was discovered. And I don't think in most of these, evidently Missoula has not done the best job in the whole world of documenting what our original architecture was. And so you do the best you can. And I don't think anybody expected to find what Nick found when he started messing around with the entrance to that building. It was astonishing. It's like, how did nobody know this was here? So, I guess I would like to see the board consider a policy relative to historic structures, and restoration of those structures that is discrete from our policies relative to a more straightforward undertaking, like tearing down a building and putting a new one back, and oh, we forgot about this piece of it, or we didn't know the price of lumber was going to go up. Those things happen. And they're actually impacting this project pretty drastically, I would imagine, right now. But that's just, and I'll get off my soapbox. That from a staff perspective, I don't think this is an unreasonable policy for the board to consider. And we've done it over and over again. We've never memorialized it or acknowledged it as a modification to a policy.
So it seems to me that we've done it in the past when we have determined, and I don't know if we've been as specific in findings, but where we have determined that the developer did and took into consideration everything that they reasonably could have. And then in the end, this just was completely unexpected. And so I remember back to some of those early downtown projects where there were, and where we were working in an environment where phase one environmental assessments weren't as well defined and as good as they are now. And but people did what they were expected to do. And then when they started digging, there's a whole new bunch of stuff there that no one anticipated. We haven't seen as many of those lately because I think the requirements for phase one environmental assessments have been refined. But I don't know how to put that in terms of a policy, if we were writing policy. But I think in terms of where things fit, this falls into that fit. Now, I don't know if Nancy's got the longest history, so I don't know if she agrees with me that that's been where we've come back and done this before. Yeah, Chris.
Chris.
Just to toss one there, it didn't kind of go into what I was talking about very well, but I think that the idea is whether it's a trail next to D.A. Davidson or an historic preservation of or historically appropriate windows on Hellgate High School or whatever, or this project, I think one perhaps difference between that and someone coming and asking for additional funds because of one thing or another, because they forgot to put in wage rates or whatever, is that you're still going to get the same project. It just costs more. In this case, in the case of trails, you're getting something more, in my opinion. So you're actually paying for more. So that's the reason I also use the word continued assistance rather than additional assistance in my memo. I don't know if that helps at all, but that was my thinking in writing it.
Well, from my perspective, Carl, I mean, I do think that we could formulate a clear policy that explains a difference in approach towards historic preservation projects as opposed to other projects. And I'm just looking at those concepts that Chris and Ellen that you presented to us, because they seem compelling to me. Even though I was the one asking the questions to Mr. Gray saying, are you going to come back? And because I feel like applicants should know that we are going to do our best to apply a consistent set of rules. But I'm also persuaded that that historic preservation is an important cultural value for us to guard in our community. We need to devote money to improving spaces like downtown Missoula. But we need to do so with an eye towards, at times, accepting that buildings need to go away, and I think of the Merc, and at other times, working very hard to preserve our heritage. And so the bullet points that you presented, that historic preservation is important to a sense of place when we're looking at redevelopment, that the historic restoration of landmark buildings presents a unique undertaking compared to other projects. That when we participate in a project like this, we should do so, we should ask of developers and of ourselves a commitment to making the project as authentic as economically possible, to revitalize the historic importance of these buildings. That we need to recognize that the facade improvement projects for historic buildings are often far more complex than regular restoration projects. And so it is perhaps unfair to ask, or basically impossible to know the true scope of these projects before you really get into them. And that we should remain committed to treating these projects differently because of those unique factors. And so I guess, wow, the first time you came, I would have been, if you would have asked me, I would have said, don't come back. But in thinking more deeply about our values here, I am persuaded that perhaps we do need to treat these projects differently.
I think there's another point too, and that is so we have this practice. I don't know if we have a written policy, but we have this practice that says you don't come back for a second bite of the apple. Okay, so why do we have that? It seems to me that we have that for, I mean, first of all, for budgeting and planning purposes. But more importantly, because I think our experience is that a well-planned, that hard numbers reflect a well-planned project, and a well-planned project is one that gets done on time and on budget. And when we set money aside for a project, we want to make sure that we've set money aside for a well-planned, well-budgeted project. Okay, so, and that works great when you're building something new. Or if you're building something small, or if you're building something where, I mean, the normal kind of project. And I think we can go back and look at this one and say that we knew going into it that it was as well planned as it could possibly be, but that also means that there's a great deal of uncertainty involved. And so I'm not sure that an exception in this project to our practice with a well-documented statement of what the reasons are, I don't think it takes away from the reasons why we have that practice. Nancy? I want to know what you think.
I think another reason for limiting the occasions for a contractor to come to the board is because we're relying on the expertise of the contractor to make the best proposal that they can to the board. And that's a good way to protect the public money. I also understand the vagaries of a project like this, that there will be unanticipated problems. I think that the best trade-off here for the public money is the historic preservation facade easement. And that for that easement, it should be the best project possible. And if the board is inclined to approve this, this amount of money, I'm glad to have heard the explanations that everyone is giving, and I would support funding based on what I said.
Okay, Ruth, Mel, anybody, anything to add? Concerns, questions, comments?
I'd be happy to make a motion when you're ready to entertain one.
Ruth, anything to add to the discussion? Well, it doesn't matter. We can have it before or after a motion. If someone's ready to make a motion, make the motion.
Make the motion.
I'll go ahead and move, Chair, and I'll hold on, I gotta read it. That the board approve an MRA pledge of up to $125,000 for additional eligible facade improvements based on the following contingencies. 1, reimbursement would be based on paid invoices with contractor lien waivers for eligible activities. 2, within an amended development agreement, the owner shall agree that reimbursement of approved additional eligible items may, at MRA's sole discretion, be spread over 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 22 and 23.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there further discussion?
I would, I appreciate the long discussion on this. In terms of policy, I think I would probably leave it just so that future boards would also have a robust discussion about these exceptions. And I appreciate Nancy's comments in particular regarding what the public gets for this additional expenditure, which is that historic easement. And I think that the public should be very glad that this money is being spent. I don't know that there's a more important use for this money.
Okay. Anybody else? Any public comment? And while we give people a chance to do that, I guess I want to say, I think I expressed the sentiment of the whole board, Nick and David, you guys are doing a spectacular job here. But for the, the policy considerations, the collateral issues that we have to deal with, this is an easy call to make because of the public benefit and the I don't know how to put this, but the generosity in some respects that you've demonstrated by taking up this private project and turning it into something that's got a huge public good.
I will criticize you for not giving us the photos when the roof went up. I saw that on Facebook. Shame on you for not including that in your PowerPoint presentation, because those were some cool photos.
The other thing I need to tell you is that I can't use names, but I have friends who are important people in the town and very people whose opinion I value very much, who are your sidewalk superintendents who provide me updates constantly about, hey, have you been by that building? You got to go by that building. You guys are doing a great job. So I just accept the compliment and move on. But all right, I take it, Jill, we have no public comment?
None of my attendees that are listed are raising their hand.
All right.
You can make comment or ask a question.
Okay, anything further? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None?
I think I might have the next best thing for Tasha's raising the roof. If you want a quick look, I think I can. So,
Well, while you're doing that, David and Nick, thank you very much. Carry forth. You're welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting, but you don't have to. And we look forward to seeing the finished product.
yeah, never mind.
Thank you guys so much. It was a fun meeting, and I want you guys all to come down and see it once it's done. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Just the difference between that, I don't know if you guys can see it or not, the difference between that and this.
All right.
All right.
Let me see where we are on our agenda. That's our action items. Proceed without prejudice policy, non-action item.
It's 2:00 and this is not pressing. If we want to hold this discussion over for a subsequent board meeting, I have no problem whatsoever doing that.
Okay.
Chair, I was just going to say the school bell rings in 10 minutes. So when you see me disappear, it's because I'm the school bus today.
Okay. Public comment feature on the agenda.
That was an informational item for the board under this new, and we can pick this up next month too, if you'd rather, Carl, but it's really quick. There's a public comment option on eScribe where the public can go to the agenda, click an item or general public comments, and they can click a button saying leave a comment. You can view that on the agenda if you visit it on the city's meeting page. We just wanted to let the board that is now an option.
So when we click on an item, if somebody's made a comment, does it show up? It's like the staff report?
Right. So when people submit a comment, it goes to the admin person assigned on the back end of the meeting, and that person approves those comments and then they get posted. This is currently used by city council and the committee meetings. There are just a couple things that we wanted to let you know, and they're more just timing issues. When you would like us to cut off that public comment, so then you have time to review it before the board meeting. Typically, they're posted by city council. Marty usually goes in a couple days before the meeting. So their city council agenda is posted on Friday, and like Monday morning, she'll go in and make and post those.
Okay. Well, we can
That'll take a manila envelope.
bring that forth as an item next time. If
I don't know if it needs to
somebody,
come
I don't
forward.
have any, I think if it gets posted, if it gets cut off that day or the day of our meeting, that gives us an opportunity to look at it before the meeting, correct?
Yes. And it becomes part of the permanent record in eScribe.
Okay. So,
Any questions from the board members on that? Concerns?
nope. Hearing none. March meeting, board meeting, what's, do we need to set a date? Is that what's going on there?
I think Leslie's on. And Ellen, maybe you have this one.
Well, I mean, it's spring break week. At least 2 of you have kids still at home, I think. You may be trying to escape or do something different, I would imagine, before you blow your brains out. So wanted to talk about maybe we push that meeting to the last week of the month instead of the week of spring break, which would be the week of the 22nd. Tasha's
So-
shaking her head. I don't know. Mel is probably just.
I don't leave my house ever, so no need to change things for me.
But move it from the 17th to, or move it from the 18th to the 25th? Is that what you're proposing?
We were thinking that wouldn't be a bad idea. I think that also gives us a little bit of slack on a couple of responses to RFPs, et cetera, that we have coming in.
Okay. Does anybody have any objection to doing that?
And we can have, Leslie can send out a thing.
A thing?
Yeah, a poll.
Well, I don't think we need, unless people don't have their calendars. I think we can just plan on moving it.
All right. We'll look at March 25th.
Okay. And if Leslie would send out a thing that tells us that we've done it,
Sorry about
that would be, all right. Okay. Sorry. I'm not very, staff reports, director report, anything that's, Ellen, you want to call our attention to in the director report?
Just 2 things. One, read the last item on there about the street reconfiguration projects. It's pretty exciting when you start putting all that together. Rest of it, I don't think there's any, anything I can add, but the one thing I did not put on there, probably because I have created a very intentional and unintentional mental block, is a report on what's going on in Helena with the legislature. There are still a slew of empty bills there that are about TIF that are just at this point still placeholders. There have been 2 bills have been introduced. Neither one of those are onerous or have any kind of really adverse effect on what we do. So I think we, as a statewide group and the League of Cities and Towns, are not going to object to those bills, but we have gotten a commitment from the bill sponsors that if people try to make amendments to those bills or change them, he will just withdraw them.
Well, the placeholders, unless something extraordinary happens, or unless they are appropriation bills, are dead on Wednesday.
Right.
So
Right. But
I think if you haven't seen the bill by then, and then actually one of the things this legislature's done that is a good thing is they changed the rules to make it. They used to, the transmittal date for appropriation bills a little later, and so what people would do is figure out a way to put a dollar appropriation in a bill and call it an appropriation bill. This legislature's clamped down on that, so I think you can assume that those placeholders are almost dead.
well,
But as soon as you do that, they come alive, so don't
Yeah.
assume anything.
from my perspective, we're counting down the days.
All right.
You
will
may
say
have
that
more to
if
add to that than what I've said.
Can we maybe next month get a staff report on the traffic study we were helping with at that intersection. Gosh, is it Madison up there on the southern part of the Rattlesnake? There just recently was an article about
Are you talking about the quiet zone?
the quiet zone situation. Since
Yeah, we can do that.
it'd be nice to get an update on what's going on.
It's moving at a snail's pace.
Okay, so we've got reminders for next meeting. We want to have whatever we've got on the quiet zone and also this idea on the proceed without prejudice. Okay, anything in the budget reports, Jill, that is new, different, unusual?
No, I don't think so. All the tax increment is up to date. Debt service funds have been filled. All the projects that you've approved through last month were added. And you can see current cash.
Questions on them, Nancy?
And Annette was going to have some comments on the West Broadway master plan. I guess that can wait until next meeting.
Okay.
That was mentioned in Ellen's report.
Yeah.
The report is that we did a kickoff meeting. I think, was it earlier this week? No, it was last week. And so it's underway. The consultants are putting together an interactive website and expect to have a virtual design charrette at the end of March. And that's, and they hope to wrap it up by the end of the summer, early fall.
Okay. Was that it, or will there be more, or will there be more for the March meeting?
No, that's it.
There we go. Thank you, Nancy. Anything else on the budget report or on the director's report?
I had something, Carl, just to report to the board that there were some excess funds from the North Reserve Scott Street Series 2017 bond that were related to phase 2 and 3 of the Scott Street Villages project. And those funds were allocated to public infrastructure improvements. And we were working with the city to try to figure those out. We were unable to expend those funds in the time period that we were allowed with the bond. And so we are doing a call on a partial redemption on that bond, and that'll be effective March 1st, 2021.
Okay.
The paperwork was just deposited in our mailbox out front. That's the phone call I got a minute ago. It was for security out front with papers.
Okay. All right. No committees that I'm aware of. So I think, unless somebody's got anything else, we're done. That was a very substantive meeting, and I appreciate everybody's hard work.
Thank you all so much.
I learned a lot. Thank you.
When that request came in from Nick, Chris and I kind of looked at each other and went, this is going to be challenging, but it's an important building.
Okay.
There's nobody else to play this role but MRA.
And again, Jill, nice job on the audit.
Thank you. They're great to work with. AZ is great to work with, and try to do my best with the MD&A so we can get as much out there as we can. So I appreciate the comments on that. Thank you.
It's you don't know what it's at the Board of Investments, which is $24 billion. So, but there's always a finding or two, and there's such a royal pain in the butt to deal with. So having just one clean audit after another is just spectacular. So
well, the reason they're great to work with is because you give them great work to work with.
We try to do our best.
I will tell you, most things here are a team effort. Finances and audit are Jill.
All right, everybody. Once again,
everybody.
disappointed I don't get to see you in person, but it's nice to see you all, and we'll see you in March.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye.